My sister posted a photo of the empty driveway on Facebook, captioning it, "Finally, the freeloader is gone." They think I was kicked out. They think I am slinking away in shame, but that post was the final evidence I needed. Their panic will not come from my anger, but from the realization that the house never belonged to them, and for the first time, I am done protecting their lies. My name is Avery Rivera. I am 33 years old, and for the last 20 minutes, I have been holding my breath. The hallway of the split-level house in West Denver was silent, a rare and heavy kind of quiet that usually only happened when the rest of the Rivera clan had vacated the premises to perform their perfect family act somewhere public. They were at a brunch in Cherry Creek, a loud affair where my mother, Shannon, would undoubtedly complain about the service while my sister, Madison, took selfies with her mimosa. My father, Rick, would pay the bill with a card that was creeping closer to its limit every month, all while smiling that tight, painful smile of a man who believes he is owed the world. I did not leave a note. Notes are for people who want to be found, or at the very least, for people who want to have the last word in an argument. I did not want an argument. I wanted an exit. My movements were efficient, practiced. I had been packing in secret for 3 weeks, staging boxes in the back of my closet, hidden behind rows of winter coats that I never wore. I carried the last box out to my sedan, a reliable, 10-year-old vehicle that Madison constantly referred to as the embarrassment mobile. It took 4 trips to clear out my room, just 4 trips. That was the sum total of my physical existence in this house. I closed the trunk. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot in the quiet suburban cul-de-sac. The air was thin and crisp, the kind of Colorado morning that usually made people talk about hiking and craft beer, but all I could smell was the stale scent of old asphalt and the lingering anxiety that had coated my skin since I moved back in here 5 years ago. I did not look back at the house. I knew exactly what it looked like. Beige siding, manicured lawn that my father obsessed over, the big bay window where my mother liked to stand and watch the neighbors so she could judge their lawn ornaments. It looked like the American dream. Inside, it felt like a prison cell where the wardens were also the inmates, and everyone was screaming. I got into the driver's seat, turned the key, and backed out of the driveway. I drove slowly, adhering strictly to the 25 miles per hour speed limit. Not because I was a careful driver, but because I refused to give them the satisfaction of a dramatic exit. I was not fleeing, I was relocating. I drove east, toward the city, toward the small, 1-bedroom condo on the 6th floor of a building that had a secure entry and 0 family members. I had closed on the property 30 days ago. I had paid the down payment with money earned from a job my family was convinced did not exist. To them, I was Avery the failure, Avery the recluse, Avery who sat in her room on her computer all day playing games or wasting time, while the rest of the world worked. I merged onto the highway, and for the first time in half a decade, I exhaled. My chest loosened, the knot in my stomach, a permanent fixture since my 28th birthday, began to unravel. Then, my phone buzzed. It was sitting in the cup holder, face up. A single vibration, short and aggressive, then another, then a steady stream of them, like a swarm of angry bees trapped in the console. I knew what it was. I did not need to look to know that Madison had checked the security cameras, or perhaps a neighbor had texted her, or maybe she just sensed a disturbance in the force field of her narcissism. I pulled into the parking garage of my new building, killed the engine, and picked up the phone. The screen was lit up with notifications. The little blue thumb icon of Facebook was dominating the list. Madison Rivera mentioned you in a post. I sat in the dark of the parking garage, the cool concrete air seeping in through the vents, and I unlocked the screen. There it was. The photo must have been taken from the security feed. Or perhaps she had driven past the house minutes after I left. It was a picture of the empty driveway, the spot where my car usually sat. Looking vacant and gray, the oil stain from my old transmission was visible, a final flaw she probably delighted in capturing. The caption was short, brutal, and entirely expected. Finally, The freeloader is gone. Maybe now we can actually breathe in our own house. Blessed new beginnings, drama-free. I stared at the words, freeloader. It was their favorite word. It was the weapon they used to bludgeon me into submission, to justify why I had to do the laundry for 4 adults, why I had to cook dinner 5 nights a week, why I had to pay a share of expenses that somehow always amounted to more than the actual utility bills. They had built an entire mythology around my laziness. They needed me to be the failure so they could feel like successes. The likes were climbing. 11, 23, 40. I scrolled down to the comments. This was the theater of public opinion, and Madison was the director. My mother, Shannon, was the first to comment. Of course, she must have been refreshing her feet at the brunch table. Shannon Rivera. Make sure you smudge the room with sage. Sweetie, need to clear out that heavy energy. Also, who is going to wash the dishes tonight? LOL. Just kidding. I love having my kitchen back. My stomach churned, but my face remained impassive. I trained myself for this, in my line of work. You cannot react to the evidence. You simply collect it. Then, a comment from my Aunt Linda, a woman who had not spoken to me directly in 3 years but felt comfortable diagnosing my life on the internet. Linda Vaughn. Probably for the best. At 33, it is time to launch, even if the rocket is broken, praying for her, and then, simply, a like from my father, Rick Rivera. He did not comment. He never put things in writing if he could help it. He just liked the cruelty. His silence was always his loudest weapon. I sat there, alone in my car, surrounded by the silence of my new life, and I made a choice. Most people would block them. Most people would type out a furious paragraph defending themselves, listing the rent paid, the groceries bought, the insults swallowed. Most people would scream into the digital void. I am not most people. I tapped the screen. I navigated to Madison's post, and I pressed a like. Then I went to the comments. I liked my mother's comment about the sage. I liked Aunt Linda's comment about the broken rocket. I liked the neighbor's comment that said, "Good riddance." I liked every single vicious, petty, self-congratulatory remark. It was a cowardly move. On the surface, it looked like submission. It looked like I was rolling over and showing my belly, accepting their narrative that I was the pathetic, beaten dog of the family, but I knew something they did not. I knew that nothing confuses a bully more than compliance. By liking their insults, I was validating them. I was making them feel safe. I was feeding their ego so they would get loud, sloppy, and confident. I wanted them to feel untouchable. I wanted them to think they had won the war so decisively that they would stop watching the perimeter. I pocketed the phone, got out of the car, and took the elevator up to the 6th floor. The condo was empty, clean, and smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I did not have much furniture yet, just a mattress on the floor and a desk I had assembled the night before. I walked straight to the desk and opened my laptop. It was a high-performance machine, encrypted, fast, and completely separate from the family network I had been using for years. I logged in and navigated to a folder on my desktop. I had named the folder simply Home Stuff. To anyone glancing over my shoulder, it would look like a collection of Pinterest ideas for decor or maybe recipes. But inside, it was a graveyard of their lies. I double-clicked. The files spread out on the screen. Scanned PDFs, downloaded county records, trust documents, screenshots of text messages, bank statements I had intercepted from the mail before my father could hide them. I opened the document titled Deed of Trust, 1402 Oakwood Drive. I looked at the names on the digital paper. They were not Rick and Shannon Rivera. They were certainly not Madison Rivera, the legal owner of the house I had just vacated. The house they were currently celebrating reclaiming was a trust, and the sole trustee and beneficiary of that trust, upon the death of Walter Vaughn, was me, Avery Rivera. They lived in my house. They parked in my driveway. They slept in bedrooms that existed under my legal protection, and they called me the freeloader for 5 years. I had let them live there because I was paralyzed by grief and a misplaced sense of filial duty. I had let them bully me in my own property because I did not want to blow up the family. I had paid the property taxes. I had paid the insurance. I had kept the roof over their heads while they mocked me for living under it. But the post on Facebook that was the bridge burning, I opened a digital sticky note on my desktop. It was my journal, my log of operations. I typed the date. Then I typed a single line. Let them be happy for exactly 7 days. 7 days, that was the timeline. 1 week for them to bask in the glory of their victory. 1 week for Madison to throw a party in the living room she thought she owned. 1 week for my father to walk around like the king of the castle. I was about to close the laptop when a notification banner slid onto the top right corner of the screen. It was an email from the encrypted server I used for my personal banking and sensitive alerts. The subject line was red. Urgent. Home equity application, verification, action required. I frowned. I had not applied for anything. My credit was frozen. My accounts were locked down. I was a fraud investigator. I did not make mistakes with my own data. I clicked the notification. The email was from a major lender, one of those predatory ones that send flyers in the mail promising fast cash with low questions asked. Dear applicant, we are processing your request for a home equity line of credit HELOC in the amount of $150,000 secured against the property at 1402 Oakwood Drive. We require one final verification of the owner's signature before funds can be released to the account ending in 4492. My blood ran cold. $150,000. They were not just celebrating my departure, they were cashing in on it. I looked at the date of the application. It had been submitted 3 days ago. They must have been waiting for me to leave, waiting for the freeloader to be out of the way so they could intercept the mail. Answer the phone and play house with the bank. They were trying to take out a loan against a house they did not own, using my name, forging my signature, and funneling the money into an account that I definitely did not control. I leaned back in my chair. The silence of the condo suddenly feeling very different. It was no longer the silence of peace. It was the silence of a crime scene. They thought the Facebook post was the climax of the day. They thought humiliating me publicly was the worst thing they could do. I looked at the email again. Urgent. I reached for my phone. But not to call them. I was not going to call them. I was not going to warn them. I typed a reply to the bank's fraud department, attaching the identity theft affidavit I had prepared months ago, just in case. Urgent, I whispered to the empty room. You have no idea. The 7-day timeline had just accelerated. They wanted a war. They wanted to talk about who owned what. I looked at the picture of the empty driveway on my phone one last time. Madison was right about one thing. The freeloader was gone. But the landlord was just getting started. The mythology of the Rivera family was built on a foundation of carefully curated anecdotes. And the central pillar of that temple was my incompetence. For years, if you asked any of our neighbors, the ladies at my mother's book club, or the distant cousins we saw only at Christmas, they would all tell you the same tragic tale. They would lower their voices to a sympathetic whisper and say that it was such a shame about Avery. They would say that while Madison was a shining star, Avery was the one who failed to launch, the one who just could not get her life together, the one who sat in her room all day staring at a screen while her poor, aging parents supported her. It was a compelling story. It had clear heroes, which were my parents, Rick and Shannon, who were saints for putting up with such a burden. It had a villain, or at least a pathetic antagonist, which was me. The only problem with the story was that it was a lie so complete that I sometimes marveled at the sheer energy it took to maintain. The reality of my life at 1402 Oakwood Drive was not that of a moocher lounging on the sofa eating bonbons. It was the life of a ghost. I learned early on that visibility was a trap. If I was seen in the kitchen, I was criticized for what I was eating. If I was seen in the living room, I was scolded for taking up space. If I was seen leaving the house, I was interrogated about where I was going and why I was not doing something more productive. So, I became invisible. I bought my own groceries and kept a mini fridge in my closet, hidden behind a stack of shoeboxes. I did my laundry at 2 o'clock in the morning on Tuesdays. because that was the only time I could be guaranteed that no one else would be awake to comment on the volume of my clothes or the brand of detergent I used. I fixed my own leaking faucet in the guest bathroom because telling my father would only result in a lecture about how I must have broken it. I existed in the negative spaces of the house, the quiet intervals between their noise, but nothing fueled their disdain more than my career. To Rick and Shannon Rivera, work was something you performed. It required a costume. It required a commute. It required a badge that you could wear around your neck and complain about at the dinner table. My father sold insurance. He wore a suit every day, drove to an office, and came home smelling of stale coffee and self-importance. My mother worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental clinic. She wore scrubs that she did not need to wear, just so people in the grocery store would ask her if she was a nurse. I worked from home. I worked in data, in patterns, in the quiet, digital reconstruction of financial crimes, but because I did it in sweatpants, and because I did not come home with stories about traffic on I-25, they decided I was not working at all. To them, the glow of my monitor was the same as the glow of a television. They would barge into my room while I was in the middle of tracing a complex wire fraud scheme and ask me to run to the post office because I was just playing on the computer. When I refused, or said I was busy, the narrative was reinforced. Avery is lazy. Avery does not understand the real world. There was only one person who ever understood the difference between noise and signal, and that was my grandfather, Walter Vaughn. Walter was my mother's father, but he seemed to belong to a different species entirely. He was a man of few words, a carpenter by trade, who had invested his money with a quiet, ruthless intelligence that my parents lacked. He did not care about appearances. He cared about foundations. When I was a child, he would sit with me in the backyard, watching the ants dismantle a fallen beetle, and he would say that the most important work is always the work that nobody sees. I was 21 years old when we moved into the house on Oakwood Drive. My parents called it their dream home. They threw a massive housewarming party where my father stood by the fireplace, swirling a glass of scotch, accepting compliments on his success. He talked about interest rates and the market, puffing his chest out as he described the square footage. But I knew the truth. We all knew the truth. Though saying it aloud was treated as treason, Rick and Shannon Rivera did not buy that house. Walter Vaughn bought it. My grandfather had been getting older. His knees were failing, and he needed family nearby, or at least, that was the pitch my mother gave him. She convinced him to buy a large property, one with a mother-in-law suite on the ground floor, under the guise that we would all live there together to care for him. It was a parasitic arrangement dressed up as filial piety. Walter paid the down payment. Walter paid the mortgage. My parents paid for the furniture and the drapes. And somehow, in their minds, that made it their kingdom. Walter lived in the suite for 5 years. 5 years where I watched him shrink. He was not sick. Not exactly. He was just tired. He was tired of my mother's shrill voice demanding to know why he had not mowed the lawn. He was tired of my father borrowing money for investments that never paid out. He was tired of Madison treating him like an ATM that occasionally needed a hug. I was the only one who just sat with him. I would bring my laptop down to his porch, and we would sit in silence. Sometimes he would ask what I was doing, and I would explain the logic of a database or the structure of a code. He never called it playing. He would nod, his eyes sharp, and say that it sounded like building a house, just with different bricks. When Walter died, I was 26. The grief I felt was a heavy, silent stone in my chest, completely at odds with the theatrical sobbing my mother performed at the funeral. She threw herself on the casket. She wore a black veil. She accepted condolences as if she were the primary victim of the tragedy. Madison posted a collage on Instagram with the caption, "My Angel," despite having not visited him in the hospital once during his final week. But the real performance happened 3 days later, in the office of a lawyer named Mr. Henderson. The reading of the will is a cliché in movies, usually involving a dramatic videotape or a secret child. Real life is colder. It is just a man in a gray suit reading legal jargon off a piece of paper while the air in the room turns to ice. My parents walked into that office with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. They were already planning renovations. My father had been talking about knocking down a wall in the kitchen. My mother wanted to turn Walter's suite into a yoga studio. They sat in the leather chairs, holding hands, looking solemnly expectant. They were waiting for the deed. They were waiting for the official transfer of power that would confirm what they had pretended was true for half a decade. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He did not look at them. He looked at me. I was sitting in the corner, wearing a plain gray dress, trying to make myself as small as possible. I wanted to be anywhere else. I felt guilty for even being there, as if discussing Walter's assets was a betrayal of his memory. To my daughter, Shannon, and her husband, Rick, Mr. Henderson read, his voice flat. I leave the sum of $25,000 each. There was a pause, a thick, confusing silence. My father blinked. I am sorry, he said, offering a tight, confused laugh. I think you missed a page. The house. I am getting to the property, Mr. Henderson said. He adjusted his glasses. Regarding the property located at 1402 Oakwood Drive and all contents therein. My mother squeezed my father's hand. This was it. I leave 100% of the title, interest, and ownership to my granddaughter, Avery Rivera. The sound that came out of my mother was not a scream. It was a gasp, as if all the oxygen had been vacuumed out of her lungs. Madison, who had been texting under the table, dropped her phone. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. What? My father whispered. That is a mistake. Avery is a child. Avery is 26, the lawyer said calmly, and she is the sole beneficiary of the real estate trust. But we live there, my mother shouted, standing up. Her face was turning a blotchy, terrifying red. We have lived there for 5 years. It is our home he promised us. He said if we took care of him. The will is quite specific. Mr. Henderson cut in. He looked at me again, and for the first time, I saw something like pity in his eyes. However, there is a stipulation regarding residency. My parents froze. They clung to that word. Stipulation. A loophole. A way back to control. Mr. Vaughn granted a restricted right of occupancy to Shannon and Rick Rivera. And Madison Rivera, the lawyer continued. You are permitted to reside in the property for as long as Avery Rivera consents to the arrangement. Provided you do not cause damage to the property or distress to the owner, this is not a life estate. It is a revocable license to occupy. Essentially, you are guests in Miss Rivera's home. I sat there, stunned. I felt the weight of 3 pairs of eyes drilling into me. They were not looking at me with newfound respect. They were looking at me with hatred. Pure, unadulterated shock and hatred. In that moment, I held all the cards. I was the owner. I was the boss. I could have told them to pack their bags. I could have sold the house. I could have evicted them and finally started my own life. But I was 26 years old, and I had spent every single day of those 26 years being trained like a dog to prioritize their feelings over my reality. I had been conditioned to believe that my mother's anger was a natural disaster that had to be appeased, and that my father's disappointment was a moral failing on my part. I shrank. It is okay, I stammered, my voice trembling. I am not going to kick you out. Nothing has to change. I saw the relief wash over them, followed immediately by a reassertion of dominance. They realized in that split second that while I had the legal paper, I did not have the spine. My father stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked at the lawyer and then at me. Well, he said, his voice regaining its bluster. Obviously, Dad was not in his right mind at the end. Confused, but we will handle it. We will manage the estate for Avery. She is not ready for that kind of responsibility. He took the power back before we even left the room, and I let him. That was the fatal error. That was the moment the trap snapped shut. Because I did not assert my ownership then. They simply decided to ignore it. They went home and continued living exactly as they had before. They took over the master bedroom. They dictated the decor. They decided who came over for dinner. When the property tax bill came, my father tossed it on my desk and said, "This is in your name, so you need to handle it. Consider it your rent." Rent. He called paying the taxes on my own house rent. And because I was desperate to avoid the conflict, because I was terrified of being the reason the family fell apart, I paid it. I paid the insurance. I paid for the new roof when it hailed. I paid for the broken furnace. And in exchange for providing them with a free home in a $1 million property, they crafted the legend of the freeloader. They realized that if anyone found out the truth that they were living off the charity of the daughter they despised, their social standing would collapse. So they had to make me small. They had to make me pathetic. They had to convince the world, and me, that I was lucky they let me stay there. They gaslit me with my own generosity. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I walked into a space I owned, only to be treated like an intruder. Every time Madison rolled her eyes at me, she was standing on floorboards that I paid to refinish. For 7 years since that meeting, I lived in a state of cognitive dissonance. I was the landlord who lived like a servant. I was the benefactor who was treated like a parasite. I swallowed the insults because I thought that was what family did. I thought that if I was just good enough, quiet enough, and helpful enough, eventually they would see me. Eventually, they would acknowledge that I was the one holding the roof up. But they never did. They just got comfortable. They forgot that the ground beneath their feet was not theirs. They forgot that the only thing keeping them in that house was the patience of a woman they openly called a failure. And that was why the Facebook post was the end. It was not just an insult. It was a declaration that they truly believed their own lie. They believed they had won. They believed the freeloader was gone, and the kingdom was finally, rightfully theirs. They had no idea that the freeloader had taken the keys with her. To the Rivera family, my bedroom door was a barrier between the vibrant, important world they inhabited and the stagnant, pathetic cave where I wasted my life. They imagined me in there scrolling through social media, napping, or perhaps playing video games like a teenager refusing to grow up. If they had ever bothered to open the door and actually look at my monitors, they would not have understood what they were seeing anyway. I am a senior fraud investigator for Blue Hearth Risk Solutions. It is a title that carries weight in the industry, even if it meant absolutely nothing at the dinner table at 1402 Oakwood Drive. Blue Hearth is a massive back-end firm that handles risk assessment and investigation for some of the largest insurance carriers and financial institutions in the country. We are the people who get called when the numbers do not add up. We are the ones who look at a claim for a burnt-down warehouse or a suspicious pattern of medical billing and find the single, loose thread that unravels the entire sweater. My job is not about intuition. It is about data. It is about staring at spreadsheets until the pixels burn into your retinas, looking for the anomaly. I look for the timestamp that does not match the travel log. I look for the digital signature that was pasted from a previous document. I look for the silence in the noise, the transaction that should be there but is missing. It requires a specific kind of mind obsessive, patient, and deeply skeptical of surface-level narratives. In a twisted way, living with my family was the perfect training ground. I spent my days analyzing strangers who were trying to construct false realities to gain financial advantage. And I spent my evenings watching my parents and sister do the exact same thing. I never told them the specifics of my work. I tried. Once, about 3 years ago, I had just been promoted and received a significant raise, bringing my salary to just over $95,000 a year. I was proud. I walked into the kitchen where my mother was chopping vegetables and told her I had good news. "I got a promotion," I said. She did not stop chopping. "That is nice. Avery, does that mean you are finally going to get out of the house and meet people?" "It is remote," I explained. "I work for a risk management firm. I catch financial criminals." She stopped then, looking at me with a smirk that was equal parts pity and disbelief. "On the computer, honey. That sounds like one of those scams. You know, like the ones Aunt Linda falls for. Make money from home. You need a real job. Something with benefits. Something where you wear a uniform, or at least business casual. It has benefits, I argued, though I could feel my confidence shrinking. It is a real career. Sure it is, she said, turning back to the carrots. Just do not get your hopes up, and do not give them your social security number. I stopped trying after that. If they wanted to believe I was making pennies filling out surveys or gambling on cryptocurrency, I let them. In fact, it became a strategic advantage. They demanded I contribute to the household expenses. This was their way of teaching me responsibility, a phrase my father loved to use while pouring himself a glass of wine that cost more than my weekly food budget. They calculated a figure $800 a month, which they claimed covered my share of utilities, internet, and wear and tear on the house. The irony was suffocating. I was the owner of the house. I paid the property taxes, which amounted to nearly $6,000 a year. I paid the homeowner's insurance. I paid for the major repairs. And yet, every month, on the 1st, I transferred $800 into my father's checking account so he could feel like the benevolent landlord allowing his deadbeat daughter to stay in a spare room. I never missed a payment. I treated it like an undercover operation. That money was the cost of my cover. As long as they thought they were squeezing me, they felt superior. If they knew I was stacking money in a high-yield savings account, maxing out my 401k, and building a diversified investment portfolio, their heads would have exploded. They would have demanded more. They would have found a reason why the rent needed to triple. So I played poor. I wore the same 5 hoodies. I drove the old sedan. I ate the leftovers they ignored. I became the gray rock they thought I was, while my bank accounts grew in the dark. Buying the condo was the culmination of 2 years of meticulous planning. I did not want just any apartment. I needed a fortress. I needed a place where my name was on the buzzer and no one else had a key. I found the unit in a quiet building near the tech center, a place filled with young professionals who were too busy to be nosy. The process of buying a home usually involves sharing the excitement with friends and family. You send listings to your mom. You ask your dad to inspect the water heater. I did none of that. I viewed the condo alone on a Tuesday afternoon during my lunch break. I communicated with my realtor, a sharp woman named Leona, exclusively through my secure work email. I signed the closing documents electronically, sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot so my family would not ask why I was going to a title company. When the wire transfer for the down payment went through $60,000 of my own hard-earned money, I felt a rush of adrenaline that beat any high I had ever gotten from catching a fraudster. This was the biggest transaction of my life, and the people sleeping down the hall had absolutely no idea it was happening. The move itself had to be executed with the same level of stealth. I knew that if I announced I was leaving, the sabotage would begin. They would guilt-trip me. They would suddenly have a medical emergency. My mother would claim she needed me to drive her to appointments. Or worse, they would try to help and snoop through my things, finding the financial documents I kept hidden. I started moving 3 weeks before the actual departure date. It was a slow bleed of possessions. Every time I left the house, my backpack was heavier than it looked. I moved my winter clothes first, claiming I was donating them. Then I moved my books, hiding them in the trunk of my car under a blanket. The most critical phase was the extraction of my paperwork. In my line of work, we have a saying, paper remembers what people forget. I had a fireproof box in my closet containing the original deed to the house, the trust documents from my grandfather, my tax returns, and the receipts for every single repair I had ever paid for. If Madison or my parents got their hands on that box, they would either hide it, destroy it, or use the information inside to twist the narrative. I moved the box on a Thursday morning at 3 a.m. I carried it out to my car wrapped in a laundry bag. My heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, I locked it in the trunk, covered it with gym clothes, and did not breathe easily until I had deposited it in a safety deposit box at my bank later that morning. By the time the final day arrived, my room was a shell. I had left just enough furniture and clutter to maintain the illusion of occupancy. The bed was still there, but the frame was disassembled. The desk was there, but the drawers were empty. I had rented a small box truck for the final load: the mattress, the desk, the chair. I parked it down the street, waiting for the driveway to be clear. My father was at work. Madison was out networking, which usually meant drinking coffee and judging people. My mother was supposed to be at her bridge club until 4 in the afternoon. I pulled the truck up at noon. I worked fast. I was sweating, my hair tied back, hauling the mattress down the hallway. I felt strong. I felt capable. I was not the weak little girl they treated me like. I was sliding the desk into the back of the truck when a car pulled into the driveway. It was my mother. She was early. She stepped out of her SUV, her face a mask of confusion that quickly hardened into suspicion. She looked at the truck, then at me, then at the half-empty room visible through the open front door. "Avery," she asked, her voice sharp, "what on earth are you doing?" "I am moving out." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. I did not stop working. I reached for the strap to secure the desk. "Moving out," she laughed, a harsh barking sound, "to where a homeless shelter, who is paying for this truck." "I rented it," I said. "With what money?" She stepped closer, invading my personal space. She smelled of heavy perfume and aggression. "Did you steal cash from your father's wallet? Or did you take out another credit card you cannot pay off?" "I have money." "Mom," I said, "I have a job." She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Oh, please, that computer thing, that is not a job. Avery, that is a hobby. You are going to sign a lease somewhere and then come crying back to us in a month when you cannot pay the rent. And do not expect us to bail you out. We have supported you long enough." "I bought a place," I said. The words just slipped out. I had not intended to tell her. I wanted to just disappear. But the condescension was like a physical weight, and I needed to push it off. She froze. The mockery vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare. "You bought a place?" "Yes. In Denver." She looked around the yard as if the answer might be written on the grass. "With what money? You have zero income." "I make $95,000 a year," I said. "I have for the last 3 years." There was a silence then. But it was not the silence of understanding. It was the silence of a glitch in the matrix. Her brain could not process the data because it contradicted the core programming of her reality. If Avery was successful, then Shannon was a liar. If Avery had money, then Shannon had no power. She blinked, and then she laughed again. This time it was louder, more brittle. "You are a pathological liar," she said, shaking her head. "I think you need help, mental help. You are making up stories because you are ashamed that you are finally being forced to grow up." She pulled out her phone. "I am calling your father. And Madison, they need to hear this. Avery bought a house. That is the funniest joke I've heard all year." I finished securing the strap. I did not try to convince her. I realized in that moment that no amount of bank statements or pay stubs would change her mind. She needed me to be the failure. She needed it like she needed oxygen. "Think what you want," I said. I walked past her, climbed into the driver's seat of the truck, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I looked in the side mirror. She was standing in the driveway, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. I could imagine the conversation. She was spinning the story already. Avery is having a breakdown. Avery is running away. Avery is delusional. I did not know then that Madison was already typing out the Facebook post. I did not know that they would twist my departure into a public celebration of their freedom. They thought they were mocking an unemployed loser who was slinking away in defeat. They did not realize they had just insulted a professional investigator who had spent 5 years documenting their every financial misstep. I drove the truck toward the highway, my hands steady on the wheel. I was not unemployed, I was not helpless, and I was definitely not broke. I was the CEO of my own life, and I had just fired my worst employees. They just did not know it yet. The rent payments had stopped. The free ride on the property taxes was over, and the fraud investigator was about to open a new case file. Subject: The Rivera family. Status active. This was not just about leaving, it was about an audit. And everyone knows that when the auditor shows up unannounced, the time for excuses is over. Silence is a weapon. In my line of work, I have learned that when you stop talking, the other person usually starts talking too much. They get nervous. They feel the need to fill the void. And in that desperate attempt to control the silence, they almost always reveal their hand. For 7 days, I gave the Rivera family nothing but silence. I sat in my new living room, the one that smelled of lavender and peace instead of stale resentment, and I watched the digital arson taking place on my laptop screen. Madison's Facebook post was still up. In fact, it had taken on a life of its own. It had become a community forum for everyone who had ever felt a twinge of jealousy towards someone else to vent their spleen. The like count had climbed to over 140. The comments were a scrolling feed of sympathy for my parents and vitriol for the invisible. Ungrateful daughter who had finally been purged from the house. I did not deactivate my account. I did not report the post for harassment. I did not text Madison to ask her to take it down. I did absolutely nothing. This lack of reaction was driving Madison insane. I knew my sister. I knew the rhythm of her narcissism. She fed on conflict. She needed me to call her screaming. She needed me to post a long defensive rant so she could screenshot it and caption it with something about mental instability. She needed resistance to validate her aggression. When I gave her nothing, she had to escalate. By day 3, the static post was not enough. She moved to Instagram stories. I watched them all from a burner account I had created years ago for investigations. First, there was a video of her standing in the doorway of my empty bedroom. She had put a sepia filter over it to make it look dramatic. "So much negative energy in here," she whispered into the camera, holding a burning stick of sage. "Clearing out the toxicity, new vibes only." Next came a photo of my father, Rick, sitting in his recliner with an exaggeratedly relieved expression. The caption read, "Dad finally getting to relax without the stress. He deserves the world." Then, a boomerang of my mother clinking wine glasses with Madison. Caption, "Cheers to a drama-free house. We survived. They were trying to bait me. They were poking the bear." Unaware that the bear was currently compiling a forensic dossier on their activities. I treated their social media activity exactly like I treated a fraud case involving a suspicious claimant. I created a spreadsheet. Column A, name of the commenter. Column B, relationship to the family. Column C, nature of the comment, supportive. Aggressive. Hearsay. Column D, screenshot link. I categorized the people who were engaging with the post. There were the enablers, like my mother's friends, who posted praying hands emojis and comments about how strong Shannon was. There were the flying monkeys, the cousins and distant relatives who had never spoken to me, but were now piling on because it felt good to be part of the mob. And then there were the witnesses. These were the neighbors, the people who lived on Oakwood Drive. They were the ones who saw my car leave every morning. They were the ones who saw me mowing the lawn while my father sat inside watching football. Their comments were hesitant. Some just liked the post but did not write anything. I noted that a like is an endorsement, but silence in the comments section usually implies a reservation. I took screenshots of everything. I expanded every comment thread. I captured the timestamps. I saved the URLs. I archived the Instagram stories before they expired. My family thought they were shouting into the void of the internet. They did not realize they were shouting into a court record. On the morning of the 4th day, I made the call. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved months ago. "Law offices of Leona Park," a crisp voice answered. "This is Avery Rivera," I said. "I would like to retain Ms. Park for a property dispute involving a revocable license to occupy and potential title fraud." I did not say family drama. I did not say my mom is being mean to me. I used the language of the law because I needed a lawyer, not a therapist. Elena Park was a shark in a silk blouse. She was a real estate attorney in downtown Denver who specialized in complex title issues and messy evictions. We had spoken once before, hypothetically, when I was first considering buying my condo. "Avery, Elena's voice came on the line a moment later. It was warm but efficient. I was wondering when you would call. Did you finally move out? I did, I said. And the tenants are getting restless. Tenants, she asked. I thought they were family. They are, I said. But as of this week, I am classifying them as hostile occupants. I need a roadmap. Elena, I need to know exactly how to remove them from the property without giving them a single inch of legal ground to stand on. I want to follow the letter of the law so closely that they cannot even slide a piece of paper between their actions and the consequences. Okay, Elena said. I could hear the click of her keyboard. First things first, let us verify the foundation. I am pulling up the county records right now. There was a pause, filled only by the sound of typing. My heart did a slow, heavy thump in my chest. Even though I knew the truth, there was always that tiny, irrational fear that somehow they had managed to change things, that somehow their loud, confident lies had rewritten reality. Okay, Elena said. I am looking at the deed for 1402 Oakwood Drive. It is clean. The title is held by the Walter Vaughn Trust, with Avery Rivera as the sole trustee and beneficiary. There are no liens, no second mortgages recorded. Wait. My stomach tightened. Wait, what? No, she corrected herself. It is fine. I just saw an inquiry from a title company yesterday. Just a soft pull. Probably nothing. It is not nothing, I said, my voice dropping. Check the active applications. I cannot see active loan applications from here, Elena said. But the title is definitely still yours. As for the evictions, since there is no lease, they are considered tenants at will. In Colorado, you have to give them proper notice, since they have lived there for more than a year, and there is no written agreement. We are looking at a specific timeline. But Avery, if we go down this road, it gets ugly. You are evicting your parents. They evicted me first, I said. They just did it socially. I am doing it legally. Understood, Elena said. I will draft the notice to quit. But Avery, you need to be prepared. Once we serve this, they are going to come at you with everything. Emotional blackmail, guilt, maybe even vandalism. I am not worried about what they will do to me, I said. I am worried about what they are doing to the house. We ended the call with a plan. Elena would prepare the paperwork. I would provide the evidence of their residency violation. I hung up and sat back in my chair. The house. I thought about the email from the bank, the one titled Urgent Home Equity Application Verification. I had flagged it, but I had not fully dissected it yet. I had been too focused on the move. Now, in the silence of the fourth day, I opened it again. I looked at the details. It was an application for a home equity line of credit, a HELOC. For those who do not know, a HELOC is essentially a credit card secured by the value of your home. You can borrow against the equity the difference between what the house is worth and what is owed. Since the house was fully paid off by my grandfather, the equity was 100%. The house was worth roughly $750,000 in the current market. The application was asking for a credit line of $150,000. I looked at the applicant information. Applicant Avery Rivera. Co-applicant Rick Rivera. Contact email avery.rivera.home, gmail.com. I stared at the email address. That was not my email. I had never created that account. I looked at the phone number listed. It was a prepaid burner number. And then I saw the attachment. It was a PDF labeled signed_authorization ... PDF ... I downloaded it ... I opened it ... It was a standard bank authorization form ... granting permission for a credit check and property appraisal ... At the bottom, there was a signature, Avery Rivera. It was a shaky, looped scrawl that looked vaguely like my signature. If I had signed it while riding a roller coaster during an earthquake, it was a forgery, a bad one, but it was a forgery nonetheless. I sat there, freezing cold despite the heating in my condo. This was not just a misunderstanding. This was not just my father trying to handle things. This was a felony. They had waited. They had waited until I was out of the house. Why? Because the bank sends an appraiser. The bank sends a notary. If I was living there, working from my room, I would have answered the door. I would have seen the mail. I would have intercepted the phone calls. They needed the freeloader gone not because I was a burden, but because I was a blockage. I was the security guard standing in front of the vault they wanted to loot. Madison's Facebook post, the bullying, the public shaming. It all clicked into place with a terrifying clarity. They were not just being mean. They were creating a cover story by painting me as a lazy, incompetent, mentally unstable runaway. They were discrediting me in advance. If I came back later and claimed they stole money, they could say, "Oh, poor Avery. She is off her meds again. She is making things up." They were establishing a narrative where my voice would carry no weight, so that when they drained the equity from the house, nobody would believe me if I tried to stop them. I looked at the date on the application again. It was submitted the day before I moved out. They knew I was leaving. They had probably been planning this for weeks, waiting for the moment the driveway was empty. My father's like on the Facebook post took on a new meaning. It was not just petty, it was tactical. I reached for my notebook. My hand was not shaking. It was steady, fueled by a cold, sharp anger that was far more useful than rage. I wrote down the loan application number. I wrote down the fake email address. I wrote down the timeline. Day 1, Avery moves out. Day 1, Madison posts the distraction. Day 2, bank attempts to verify identity. Day 3, bank requests appraisal. They were trying to pull $150,000 out of my inheritance, and knowing my father, that money was already spent in his head. A new car, a business investment, a vacation to Italy that Madison had been hinting at. It did not matter. I picked up my phone and opened the banking app for the institution where the application had been lodged. I did not log in as a customer. I navigated to the fraud reporting portal. I was not just the victim here. I was the investigator. And I was about to flag this file with a code red that would freeze their entire financial existence. I looked at the screen one last time before I hit submit. I realized then that the silence of the last 7 days had been the most dangerous thing I could have given them, because while they were busy performing for an audience on Facebook, thinking they had won the game, they had forgotten to check if the microphone was still on in the room where they were committing the crime. It turned out, the post was not just a smear campaign. It was a victory lap before a bank robbery. I sat at my desk, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the hold music of the bank. It was a generic, synthesized jazz loop that was designed to calm people down, but in my case, it was providing a rhythm for my rising adrenaline. I was not calling the customer service line. I had bypassed the main menu and dialed directly into the fraud department's escalation queue, a number I knew by heart from my own work. When a human voice finally answered, it was tired, but professional. "Fraud operations, this is Marcus. How can I assist you?" "My name is Avery Rivera," I said, my voice steady. "I am calling to report an unauthorized application for a home equity line of credit submitted under my name and social security number. The application reference number is 4922 Alpha Bravo." There was a pause, the sound of typing, and then a shift in Marcus's tone. "I see the application here, Ms. Rivera. It is currently in the verification stage. You are saying you did not submit this." "I did not," I said. "I am the sole owner of the property at 1402 Oakwood Drive. I am currently living at a different address. I need you to flag this application as fraudulent immediately. Furthermore, I need you to send me the metadata associated with the submission. I need the IP address, the contact email, the phone number used, and a digital copy of any supporting documents uploaded." "I can flag it," Marcus said, hesitating, "but I cannot release the file details without a subpoena or a police report, usually." "Marcus," I cut in, keeping my voice level, "I am a senior fraud investigator with Blue Hearth Risk Solutions. I know that since the application is in my name, I have the right to view the documents purported to be signed by me under the Fair Credit Reporting Act to dispute the accuracy. If you do not send me that file, I will have to escalate this to your compliance officer as a refusal to provide consumer disclosure. We can do this the easy way, where you help me stop a crime, or the hard way. Silence. Then, a sigh. Okay, I am sending a secure link to the email on file, the real email on file. 2 minutes later, the file arrived. I opened it, and the pieces of the puzzle slammed together with a sickening click. The contact email they had used was avery.rivera.home@gmail.com. It was close enough to my actual name to look legitimate to a lazy underwriter, but it was definitely not mine. I ran a quick search on the domain creation date. The email account had been created exactly 5 days ago, 2 days before I moved out. The phone number was a prepaid burner, the kind you buy at a convenience store for $20. But it was the attachment that made my blood turn to ice water. It was a document titled General Durable Power of Attorney. It was a legal form, likely downloaded from a free legal template website. It stated that I, Avery Rivera, granted my father, Rick Rivera, full authority to act on my behalf regarding real estate transactions, banking, and debt management. I scrolled to the bottom. There was a signature. Avery Rivera. It was done in blue ink. It was shaky. It looked like someone had practiced my signature a dozen times on a napkin and then tried to replicate it from memory. The loops on the R were too wide. The slant was wrong. It looked like the signature of a child trying to forge a parent's note to get out of gym class. Next to it was a notary stamp. I zoomed in. The stamp belonged to a notary in a strip mall 3 towns over. I made a mental note to look him up later. Unscrupulous notaries who stamped documents without the signatory present were a special kind of criminal, and I would deal with him in due time. They had forged a power of attorney. They weren't just trying to trick the bank, they were trying to legally steal my identity. If this document had been accepted, my father could have drained my bank accounts, sold the house, or taken out credit cards in my name. All while claiming he had my permission, I called Leona. "You need to see this," I said, forwarding the file to her encrypted server. "I am opening it now," Leona said. I heard her intake of breath. "Oh, Avery, this is bad." "It is clumsy," I said. "No, I mean, it is bad for them," Leona said, her voice dropping to a serious, hushed register. "This is not a civil dispute anymore. Forging a power of attorney, using it to apply for a federally backed loan, that is bank fraud, that is identity theft, that is forgery. In Colorado, that is a Class 4 felony. If the amount they tried to secure was over $100,000, which it is, we are talking about mandatory prison time if the prosecutor decides to pursue it." "I know," I said. I stared at the screen, at the shaky blue ink that was supposed to be me. "They think I am just a scared little girl. They think I will see this and cry. They do not realize they just handed me a loaded gun." "What do you want to do?" Leona asked. "We can go to the police right now. We have the evidence." "No," I said. "Not yet. If I go to the police now, they will play the victim. They will say it was a misunderstanding, that I verbally agreed and then changed my mind. They will use the Facebook post to say I am unstable. I need them to dig the hole deeper. I need them to confirm they are acting maliciously. So, we stick to the plan. We accelerate the plan," I said. "Draft the letter, but add the stipulation about the loan." That afternoon, I went to the post office. I did not use the one near my new condo. I drove to a neutral location downtown. I paid for the postage with cash. I held the envelope in my hands. It was thick. Inside were 10 pages of documents that would dismantle the comfortable reality my family had lived in for 7 years. I sent it via certified mail. Return receipt requested. This meant that the mail carrier would have to physically hand the envelope to someone at the house, and that person would have to sign for it. That signature would be mailed back to me as legal proof of receipt. I imagined the scene. It would probably be tomorrow morning. The mail carrier would walk up the driveway, the same driveway Madison had posted on Facebook. My father would probably answer the door. Expecting a package from Amazon, or perhaps the approval letter from the bank for the loan he thought he had successfully applied for. Instead, he would get this. The letter began with a formal header, notice of ownership and cease and desist. The first paragraph was a cold splash of water. It stated clearly, citing the deed and the trust, that I was the sole and exclusive owner of the property. It stated that their right to occupy the premises was a revocable license granted by me, which could be terminated at any time. Then came the ultimatum. Option 1, tenancy agreement. They could stay, but the free ride was over. If they wished to remain in the property, they had to sign a standard month-to-month lease agreement. The rent would be set at fair market value for a 4-bedroom home in West Denver, $3,200 per month. Additionally, they would be required to transfer all utilities, water, gas, electric, trash into their own names within 48 hours. Option 2. Vacate the premises. If they did not agree to the lease terms, they had 30 days to vacate the property. This was the standard legal notice required by Colorado law for at-will tenants. But the real dagger was in the specific clauses I had added. Clause 4, prohibition of encumbrance. The occupants shall not attempt to encumber, mortgage, or use the property as collateral for any financial instrument. Any attempt to do so will be considered a material breach of this agreement and immediate grounds for eviction. And then, the response to the Facebook post. Clause 5. Non-disparagement and quiet enjoyment. The occupants agree to cease all public disparagement of the owner, continued publication of false or defamatory statements regarding the owner's financial status, mental health, or employment on social media platforms constitutes harassment and creates a hostile environment, which is grounds for immediate termination of occupancy rights. I did not explicitly mention the forged power of attorney in the letter. That was my ace in the hole. I wanted to see if they would mention it. I wanted to see if they would try to lie about it. I dropped the envelope into the slot. It made a soft thud. I walked back to my car, feeling a strange lightness in my chest. For years, I had been afraid of them. I had been afraid of their shouting, their disapproval, their ability to make me feel small. But as I drove back to my quiet, empty condo, I realized that the dynamic had shifted. They were no longer the parents scolding a child. They were suspects in an active investigation, and I was the one holding the file. I went home and opened my laptop. I logged into the bank's portal again. I saw a new note on the file. Added by the fraud department. Status frozen. Internal investigation active. Do not originate loan. Do not discuss with applicant. My father was going to call the bank tomorrow, expecting to hear that the money was on its way. He was going to hear a recording telling him to contact the fraud department, and right around the same time, the mailman would be walking up the steps. I checked Madison's Facebook post one last time. She had added a comment an hour ago. Madison Rivera. So glad the toxic energy is gone. We are planning a redecorating party next weekend. Anyone know a good painter? I almost laughed. A redecorating party. She was picking out paint colors for walls she did not own, to be paid for with money she did not have, in a house she was about to be asked to pay rent for. I closed the laptop. Enjoy the party, Madison, I whispered. It is going to be the last one. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window of my 6th-floor apartment. I could see the city lights of Denver stretching out before me. Somewhere out there in the grid of lights was Oakwood Drive. I was not angry anymore. Anger is hot. Anger is messy. What I felt was the cool, clinical detachment of a surgeon scrubbing in. The tumor had been identified. The patient had been prepped. Now, it was just a matter of making the cut. I waited. I knew exactly how they would react. They would not read the letter carefully. They would scan it, see the demand for money, and they would explode. They would call me. They would text me. They would try to use the old buttons: guilt, fear, obligation, but I had taken the batteries out of those buttons. My phone sat on the counter, face down. I had already set up a new rule in my settings. All calls from my mother, father, and sister were set to go immediately to voicemail. All texts would be silently archived without triggering a notification. The letter stated clearly, all future communication regarding the property must be in writing and directed to the law office of Elena Park. If they wanted to talk to me, they would have to learn how to write a formal letter, and considering the literacy level of their emotional intelligence, I expected a long, loud silence followed by a catastrophic noise. I took a sip of water. The trap was set. The bait was the house itself, and they had already swallowed the hook. Now, I just had to wait for the line to go taut. The reaction to the certified letter was instantaneous, violent, and utterly predictable. I had calculated the delivery time based on the tracking number. The mail carrier scanned the envelope at 10:45 in the morning. At 10:48, my phone began to vibrate. It did not stop for the next 6 hours. It buzzed and danced across the granite countertop of my kitchen island like a possessed object, a physical manifestation of the panic currently engulfing 1402 Oakwood Drive. I did not answer. I simply watched the notifications stack up on the lock screen, analyzing them with the same detached curiosity I used when reviewing a frantic email chain from a suspect who realizes they have been caught embezzling. My mother, Shannon, was the first to strike. Her strategy was classic deflection mixed with a heavy dose of infantilization. Mom, Avery, call me immediately. I do not know who put you up to this, but this is not you. You are being manipulated. Someone is poisoning your mind against your own flesh and blood. You are destroying this family. She could not conceive of a world where I, her quiet, useless daughter, had generated a legal document on my own, in her narrative. I was a non-player character, therefore, if I was taking action, it must be because a villain had seized the controller. She was trying to frame herself as the savior rescuing me from the bad influence, rather than the squatter I was evicting. Then came my father. Rick Rivera did not plead. He commanded, "Dad, get home, now. We are not doing this through lawyers. We settle things in this house, face to face. You are going to withdraw that letter and apologize to your mother. She is crying in the kitchen. I hope you are proud of yourself." He was trying to reestablish the physical hierarchy. He knew that if he could get me back into that living room, sat on the sagging sofa while he loomed over me, he could bully me back into submission. He wanted to bypass the law because the law does not care how loud you shout. The law only cares whose name is on the deed. But Madison was the most interesting case study. Her messages were an erratic EKG of narcissism, fluctuating wildly between dismissal, rage, and bargaining. Madison 10:55, AMLOL. Is this a joke? You actually paid a lawyer for this. You are so dramatic. Madison 11:10, AM. Mom is freaking out. You need to stop. It is not funny anymore. Madison 11:45, AM. You are seriously going to charge your own parents rent after everything they did for you? You are a monster. I cannot believe I shared DNA with you. Madison 12:30 p.m. Avery, please, just call me. We can talk about the Facebook post. I will delete it. Okay, just tell the lawyer to stop. You are embarrassing me. She had gone from mocking me to bargaining with me in the span of 90 minutes. The freeloader post was her leverage, and now she was offering to trade it for her housing security. She did not understand that the currency had changed. I did not care about the post anymore. The post was just the catalyst. We were now dealing with the reality of the asset. I adhered strictly to the protocol I had established with Elena. I copied the text of my standard response and pasted it into the reply field for each of them. All options regarding your residency are outlined in the formal notice. Please direct your response in writing to the law office of Elena Park. I will not discuss this matter personally. I sent it to my mother. I sent it to my father. I sent it to Madison. Then I put the phone on silent and made myself a cup of tea. The silence did not last long. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a number I did not recognize appeared on the screen. It was a local area code. I let it go to voicemail. But then it rang again immediately. In my line of work, a double dial usually implies urgency or a persistent scammer. I picked up, but I stayed silent. waiting for the other side to speak. Avery, it is Aunt Marcy. I let out a slow breath. Of course, the flying monkeys had been deployed. Marcy was my father's sister. She was a woman who weaponized toxic positivity and used the phrase "family is everything" to justify absolutely any behavior. No matter how abusive, she lived 2 towns over and usually only called me on my birthday to ask why I was not married yet. "Hello, Aunt Marcy," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Avery, honey, I just got off the phone with your dad," she began, her voice dripping with that cloying, suffocating sweetness. "He is beside himself. They are all just in shock. I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," I said. "They received a legal notice. It is quite clear." "But Avery," she sighed, as if explaining gravity to a toddler, "you cannot treat family like a business transaction. Your parents raised you. They put a roof over your head. They fed you. And now, when they are getting older, you want to kick them out onto the street. It is sinful. Avery, it is not what your grandfather would have wanted. My grandfather is the one who left the house to me." "Marcy," I said, "exclusively, he knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted you to take care of them," she argued, her voice sharpening. "He did not leave it to you so you could turn into a slumlord. You need to be the bigger person here. You need to apologize and go home. Family forgives. Avery, family forgives." "Okay," I said. "I hear you." "Good," she said, sounding relieved. "I knew you would see reason. I will tell Rick you are calling him." "No," I said. "I hear you, but I have a question first." "What?" "Since family is everything," I said, speaking slowly and clearly, "and since you are so concerned about them having a roof over their heads without paying for it, are you offering to take them in?" There was a pause, a long, heavy, static-filled pause. "Excuse me?" she asked. "If I evict them," I continued, "will you let Rick, Shannon, and Madison move into your house? You have that big guest basement, right? They can live there for free. They do not pay for utilities. By the way, and you will have to cook for them, and Madison will need the Wi-Fi password immediately. So, can I tell them to pack their bags for your place?" "Well," Marcy stammered, "if that is not Avery, you know Uncle Bob needs his space. We do not have room for 3 adults. That is ridiculous." "So it is ridiculous for you to house them. But it is a moral obligation for me," I asked. "Even though it is my house." "It is different," she snapped. "It is their home." "Not legally," I said. "And not anymore, if you're not willing to sign a lease for them or house them yourself." "Marcy, then you have no vote in this election. Goodbye." I hung up. I blocked her number. The gaslighting was textbook. They were trying to make me doubt my own reality. They wanted me to feel like the aggressor for simply asserting the boundaries that any normal adult would have. They did not say, "We are sorry we stole your identity to try and get a loan." They did not say, "We are sorry we called you a freeloader." They just said, "You are overreacting." By 4 o'clock, the narrative had shifted again, since they could not reach me, and Marcy had failed to shame me. Madison decided to take the war back to the public front. I received an alert from my burner Instagram account. Madison had posted a new story. It was just text, white font on a black background, somber and serious. "Please keep my family in your prayers. Dealing with a severe mental health crisis involving a close relative, it is heartbreaking when someone you love loses touch with reality and turns on the people who try to help them. Mental health family. Crisis, heartbroken, I stared at the screen. It was brilliant. In a twisted, evil way. She was planting the seed. She was telling the world that my legal action was not a rational decision by a property owner, but the manic episode of a mentally unstable woman. She was discrediting the witness before I even took the stand. If I tried to speak out now, people would view it through the lens she had crafted. "Oh, poor Avery. She is off her meds. Look at her attacking her family." It made my blood boil. But I forced myself to stay cold. I took a screenshot. I added it to the folder labeled defamation, but the lowest blow came just before 5 o'clock. My building has a concierge desk in the lobby. It is one of the reasons I bought the condo. I wanted security. The intercom in my apartment buzzed. "Ms. Rivera," the concierge's voice came through the speaker. "I have a call on the main line. It is a woman claiming to be your mother. She sounds very distressed." My hand tightened on the counter. "What does she want?" "She says there is a family emergency," the concierge said. "She says she is worried about your safety and that you are not answering your phone. She is asking for your unit number so she can come up and check on you. She says she is driving over right now." They did not know where I lived. They knew I had moved, and Madison might have seen the general area if she had tracked my phone before I turned off the location sharing. But they did not know the building or the unit. They were trying to trick the building management into doxing me. "Do not give her any information," I said, my voice hard. "Do not confirm I live here. Do not give her my unit number. And if she shows up, do not let her pass the lobby. In fact, if she arrives and refuses to leave, please call the police and have her trespassed." "I understood. Ms. Rivera," the concierge said, sounding slightly alarmed. "I will handle it. Is everything okay?" "It is a legal dispute," I said. "She is a hostile party. Please treat her as a security threat." "Understood." I hung up, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a violation. They were hunting me. They felt entitled to my physical space, just as they felt entitled to my financial assets. I called Elena immediately. "They are trying to find me," I said. "They called my building security." "That is harassment," Elena said. Her voice was sharp, and it is a massive tactical error on their part. "How is it an error?" I asked. "It feels like they are closing in." "Because they are panicking." "Avery," Elena explained. "When people panic, they get sloppy. They stop thinking about the long game and start reacting to the immediate threat. They are terrified. They realize the letter is real. They realized you are not coming back to fix the faucet or pay the bills. And most importantly, they know about the loan." "They have not mentioned the loan," I said. "Not in a single text." "Exactly," Elena said. "That is the tell. If they were innocent, they would be asking why you are talking about encumbrances. They would be confused. The fact that they are ignoring that specific clause means they know exactly what you are talking about, and they are terrified that you have proof. So what do I do?" "You hold the line," Elena said, "and you watch, because if they are trying to find you physically, it means they are trying to force you to sign something, or stop you from filing something. Check the bank activity again." I sat down at my laptop. I pulled up the portal. I saw it. There was a new document upload in the HELOC application file. It had been uploaded 20 minutes ago. I opened it. It was a letter, purportedly from me, addressed to the bank, to whom it may concern. Please disregard the previous fraud alert. It was a misunderstanding caused by a family dispute. I, Avery Rivera, confirm that the application for the home equity line of credit is valid, and I wish to proceed. My father, Rick Rivera, has my full permission to facilitate this transaction. Signed, Avery Rivera. The signature was different this time. It was better. They had practiced. I stared at the screen, blinking. They were not just doubling down. They were tripling down. They were so desperate for that money, so convinced that they could bully reality into submission, that they had impersonated me to the fraud department to try and cancel a fraud alert. It was the stupidest, most arrogant crime I had ever witnessed. "Elena," I said into the phone, my voice incredibly calm, "you are not going to believe this." "What did they do?" "They just tried to override the fraud alert," I said. "They uploaded a letter claiming I made a mistake. They are impersonating me again." "Send it to me," Elena said. "Right now." I forwarded the file. "Avery," Elena said, and for the first time, she sounded excited. "They just handed us the keys to the kingdom. This is wire fraud. This is bank fraud. And they did it from an IP address that we can trace directly to the router at Oakwood Drive. They didn't just cross the line, they sprinted past it off a cliff. I looked at the text messages still flooding my phone. My mother asking why I was so cruel. Madison posting about my mental health. My father demanding I come home. They were screaming at me to look at them, to pay attention to their drama, while their hands were in the cookie jar, actively stealing from me in real time. Let them scream, I whispered. I typed a message to the bank's investigator on the secure portal. New fraudulent document uploaded by suspect. Please trace IP and secure metadata immediately. I am preparing a police report. The family is family argument works well when you are arguing about who washes the dishes. It works less well when you are committing federal crimes to steal $150,000 from the person you are claiming to love. I closed my eyes. The fear was gone. The guilt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard math of the situation, and the numbers for the Rivera family were about to crash. The digital arena is a fickle place. One moment you are the hero of your own curated narrative, basking in the warm glow of validation. And the next, you are the villain in a story you did not realize was being broadcast. Madison had spent 5 years treating social media like her personal stage. Confident that the audience would always applaud because she controlled the lighting. She had blocked me from seeing her posts years ago. Assuming that meant I was blind to them, she forgot that on the internet, nothing is truly private, and walls are just suggestions. On the morning of the 5th day, Madison decided that the silence from my end was not a victory, but a threat. She needed to reinforce her position. She needed to inoculate her followers against the truth before it could infect them. She posted a text-heavy graphic on Facebook, the kind with a soft, floral background that clashes violently with the passive-aggressive message overlaid on it. Sometimes, you have to love people from a distance. It is heartbreaking when family members become toxic and refuse to take accountability for their own lives. We tried so hard to help, but some people just want to play the victim, sending love to everyone dealing with difficult relatives today. Boundaries, growth healing. It was a masterclass in vague booking. She did not name me, but she did not have to. Everyone who had seen the freeloader post knew exactly who she was talking about. She was painting a picture of a benevolent sister forced to cut ties with a leech. The comments started rolling in immediately. Ideally, I should have ignored it. My lawyer, Leona, would have advised me to ignore it, but I was not just a plaintiff. I was a human being who had spent 1/3 of a decade being called a parasite in a house I paid for. I sat at my laptop, looking at the 2 images on my desktop. Image 1. A screenshot of Madison's post from 5 days ago, the picture of the empty driveway. The caption, finally, the freeloader is gone. Image 2. A high-resolution scan of the warranty deed for 1402 Oakwood Drive. I opened a photo editing program. I carefully redacted my social security number and the specific recording numbers that could be used for identity theft. I left the property address clearly visible. I left the date of recording clearly visible 7 years ago, and most importantly, I left the section labeled Grantee/Owner clearly visible. Avery Rivera, trustee of the Walter Vaughn Living Trust. I placed the 2 images side by side. On the left, the insult. On the right, the legal reality. I did not write a long, emotional diatribe. I did not call Madison a liar. I did not mention the fraud, the stolen mail, or the fake loans. I kept it strictly to the facts of the residency. I uploaded the image to my own Facebook page. I set the privacy settings to public. My caption was 24 words long. Clarification regarding my recent move. I am not a tenant who was evicted. I am the owner of the property. Best wishes to the occupants. I hit post. Then, I shared it. I did not tag Madison. I did not tag my parents. I did not have to. The algorithm is a heat-seeking missile for drama. Because we had so many mutual friends, neighbors, cousins, old high school acquaintances, the post began to bleed into their feeds immediately. I watched the screen. For the first 10 minutes, there was nothing. It was the deep breath before the plunge. Then, a notification. Sarah Jenkins commented on your post. Sarah was the woman who lived directly across the street. She was the neighborhood gossip, the town crier of Oakwood Drive. She had liked Madison's freeloader post. Sarah Jenkins, Wait Avery. You own the house. I thought it was your parents' house. I did not reply. I let the document speak. Then another comment. This one from a guy I went to high school with, who is now a real estate agent, Mark D. Just pulled the county records because I was curious. It is legit. She has been on the title since 2019. Damn. The tide turned not with a crash, but with a series of bewildered gasps. The people who had piled on to Madison's post, the ones who had laughed at the freeloader joke, were suddenly realizing they had been cheering for the wrong team. They had publicly insulted the landlord while praising the squatters. I went back to Madison's profile. She had not seen it yet. She was still replying to comments on her toxic family post, soaking up the sympathy. Madison Rivera. Thanks, hun. It is just so hard when you give and get nothing back. And then, right underneath that comment, a mutual friend named Jessica dropped the bomb. Jessica T. Madison. Have you seen Avery's post? She just posted the deed to the house. Is it true she owns it? I could almost see the color draining from Madison's face through the screen. There was a long pause. Then, Madison's comment disappeared. Then, Jessica's comment disappeared. Madison was deleting them. She was scrubbing the evidence. She was trying to put the genie back in the bottle. But she was using a butterfly net to catch a hurricane. People started navigating away from her page and coming to mine. My notification count jumped from 3 to 50 in the span of an hour. Neighbor 1, I'm so confused. If you own the house, why did they say you were freeloading Cousin Mike? Is this real Uncle Rick told us he bought that place for retirement? Neighbor 2? Avery, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I feel terrible about my comment on Madison's post. The narrative was fracturing. The story of the lazy sister could not survive the oxygen of the truth. You can call someone lazy. You can call them messy. You can call them difficult, but you cannot call them a freeloader when they hold the mortgage deed. It is a mathematical impossibility. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Mom, take it down. Right now. You are embarrassing us. You are making your father look like a fool. I did not reply. Mom, we are your parents. How dare you humiliate us like this? We told people it was our house to protect your privacy. We were trying to help you. The mental gymnastics required to type that sentence must have been exhausting. They claimed credit for my property to protect my privacy, yet they publicly shamed me on that same property to destroy my reputation. The logic was so twisted it was almost impressive. I refreshed the page. My father had entered the chat. He did not comment on my post. He commented on Madison's post, which was rapidly filling up with questions he did not want to answer. Rick Rivera. Everyone needs to calm down. There are complicated legal matters involved here that you do not understand. Avery is trying to force her own parents out on the street. She is ungrateful and vindictive. We will not be discussing this further. It was a fatal error. By claiming I was forcing them out on the street, he inadvertently admitted that I had the power to do so. He admitted I was the owner. The comment section exploded. Stranger A. So she does own it, Stranger B. Wow, calling the owner a freeloader is wild. Stranger C. If it is her house, why are you guys acting like you are the victims? Just pay rent like everyone else. I sat back, sipping my tea. This was not bullying. This was the correction of the record. I had not said a single bad word about them. I had not called them names. I had simply held up a mirror, and they were screaming because they did not like the reflection. But the real twist, the one I did not see coming, arrived via a direct message at 6 o'clock in the evening. It was from a user I did not know. The profile picture was of a young woman, maybe 22, holding a cat. Her name was Chloe. Chloe, hi. I am so sorry to bother you. I saw your post being shared in the Denver housing group. I am really confused and kind of freaking out. You are the owner of 1402 Oakwood, right? I frowned. Why would a stranger be freaking out about my house? Avery? Yes, I am. Can I help you? The typing bubbles appeared, vanished, and appeared again. She was nervous. Chloe. Okay, so I just viewed the basement apartment at that address yesterday. I met with a woman named Madison. She said she was the property manager for her family. I signed a lease for 6 months starting on the 1st of next month. I already sent her the deposit and the first month's rent via Zelle. My heart stopped. I read the message again. Basement apartment. There was no basement apartment. The basement at Oakwood Drive was finished. Yes, but it was not a legal dwelling unit. It did not have a separate egress window in the bedroom. It did not have a proper kitchen, just a wet bar. It was not coded for occupancy. And more importantly, I had not authorized anyone to live there. Avery Chloe. Please tell me you did not send the money yet. Chloe. I did. $1,200. She said if I did not send it right then. She had 3 other people waiting. She gave me a receipt written on a piece of notebook paper. Is she not allowed to rent it? I closed my eyes and pressed the heels of my hands into them. Madison. She wasn't just trying to steal the equity through the bank loan. She was running a side hustle. She was renting out a room in my house, a room that was not even legally a bedroom, to a college student, and pocketing the cash. It made sense now. The redecorating party she mentioned. She wasn't painting the living room. She was probably slapping a coat of white paint on the basement walls to make it look like a studio apartment. She was collecting deposits for a property she did not own, creating a lease she had no right to sign, and creating a fire hazard liability that would fall squarely on my shoulders if anything happened. This was not just fraud against me anymore. This was fraud against the public. She had taken $1,200 from a girl who probably waited tables to save it up. Avery Chloe. Listen to me carefully. I am the sole owner. Madison has no legal authority to rent that space. The lease she gave you is void. Do you have screenshots of the Zelle transaction and the messages, Chloe? Oh my God. Yes, I have everything. Am I going to lose my money, Avery? No, you are not going to lose your money. But you are going to have to help me. Send me everything you have. The texts, the transfer confirmation, the photo of the lease. 5 minutes later, my phone pinged with the images. I looked at the lease. It was a joke. It was downloaded from the internet, filled out in Madison's looping handwriting. Landlord, the Rivera family. Tenant Chloe Miller. Rent $600 per month. Deposit $600. And then, the text messages. Madison, hey girl. Just confirming I got the cash. You are going to love the place. My parents are upstairs, but they are super chill. Just keep the noise down after 10. I felt a cold fury rising in me that made the earlier anger seem like a mild annoyance. Stealing from me was one thing. I was family. I was the enemy. But stealing from a stranger, creating a fake rental in a housing market where people were already desperate, that was predatory. That was low. I forwarded the entire conversation to Elena. Avery. Add this to the pile. She is renting out the basement. She took a deposit. Elena replying instantly. You are kidding. That is theft by deception and zoning violations. Avery, if that girl moves in, you are liable. We need to shut this down immediately. Avery, I know. I am handling it. I went back to the message thread with Chloe. Avery Chloe. I am going to make sure you get your money back, but you cannot move in. The unit is not legal, and Madison does not have the right to rent it. I need you to do exactly what I say. I looked at the time. It was 7:30. My parents were probably eating dinner right now. Madison was probably checking her bank account, looking at that $1,200, thinking about buying a new purse or maybe putting a down payment on a trip, thinking she was so smart, so entrepreneurial. She had called me a freeloader. She had called me a burden. And all the while, she was selling tickets to a show she didn't own, in a theater she didn't pay for. I picked up my phone and dialed the non-emergency line for the local police department. I had hesitated before. I had wanted to keep it civil, keep it legal, keep it on paper. But now there was a victim who wasn't me. Police dispatch, the voice said. Hi, I said. I need to report a scam in progress. Someone is fraudulently renting out a property they do not own, and they have taken money from a victim. Address of the incident: 1402 Oakwood Drive, I said. And are you the victim? No, I said. I am the owner. The person running the scam is my sister. The silence on the other end lasted only a second. We can send an officer out to take a report, the dispatcher said. Please do, I said, and tell them to ask for Madison. I hung up. The social media court had already ruled in my favor. The jury of public opinion had seen the receipts and delivered their verdict. But now, the real law was coming to the door. Madison wanted attention. She wanted to be an influencer. Well, she was about to influence a police report, and I had a feeling that was one post she wouldn't be able to delete. The situation with the basement apartment escalated from a family dispute to a legal liability faster than I could have predicted. While my initial instinct had been to call the police, Leona, being the prudent attorney she was, advised a more surgical approach first. We needed to document the violation before we brought in law enforcement, to ensure that if charges were pressed, they would stick, and to protect me from any countersuit claiming malicious prosecution. So, instead of a squad car, Madison received another letter. This one was hand-delivered by a process server at 8 o'clock the next morning. It was a cease and desist order specifically regarding the unauthorized subletting of the property. It demanded an immediate halt to all rental activities, the removal of any online listings, and a full accounting of any funds collected from prospective tenants. Madison's reaction was to lie. She did not reply to Leona. She texted me, breaking her own silence. Madison. What is wrong with you? I'm not renting anything out. I just put a feeler out to see what the market was like. Stop harassing me with these fake lawyers. It was a bold lie, considering I had the Zelle receipt on my screen. Avery Madison. I have a copy of the transfer from Chloe Miller for $1,200. I have the text messages where you gave her a move-in date. This is theft by deception. You are taking money for a property you do not own, and a unit that is not legal. Madison. You are spying on me. That is creepy. Avery. Seriously creepy. She deflected. She ignored the evidence and attacked the method. It was her standard operating procedure. But I was not playing her game. I went back to Chloe. Avery. Chloe. I am drafting a repayment agreement. If Madison returns your money within 24 hours, will you agree not to press charges, Chloe? Yes, I just want my money back. I need it for a real apartment. I sent the ultimatum to my parents. I included the screenshots. I included the receipt. Avery Madison has taken $1,200 from a student for an illegal rental. If that money is not returned to Chloe Miller by 5 o'clock today, I will be forced to file a police report for theft and fraud. This is not a negotiation. Fix this. The silence that followed was heavy. I could imagine the scene in the kitchen. My mother, who prided herself on being a pillar of the community, staring at the proof that her golden child was a petty scammer. My father, who always bragged about his honest living, realizing his daughter was running a slumlord operation out of his basement, but their shock, as I soon learned, was not moral, it was social. My mother called me 10 minutes later. I answered this time, because I needed to hear the admission. Avery, she hissed, her voice low and trembling. How could you let this get out? Let what get out? I asked. The truth. You spoke to that girl, she demanded. You told a stranger our business. Do you know how embarrassing this is? If she tells people, if she posts about this. Madison took her money. Mom, I said, cutting her off. She stole $1,200. She did not steal it, my mother snapped. She was being entrepreneurial. She was trying to help with the bills since you abandoned us. She made a mistake with the paperwork. That is all. You are making it sound like she's a criminal. Taking money for a product you cannot deliver is a crime, I said. It is fraud. She is your sister, she shouted. You are supposed to protect her. You just pay the girl back. You have all that money now, right? You pay her, and we will handle Madison internally. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. No, I said. I am not paying for Madison's crimes anymore. I am not cleaning up her messes. She pays it back, or she deals with the police. You are cruel, my mother whispered. I do not know who you are anymore. You are cold. You are heartless. I am the owner, I said, and the deadline is 5 o'clock. I hung up. At 4:45, Chloe texted me. Chloe, I just got the money back. She sent it, but she put charity in the memo line. Whatever. I got it. Thank you so much. Avery. Charity? Even in defeat, Madison had to frame herself as the benevolent one. She had to pretend she was giving the money back out of the goodness of her heart. Not because she was terrified of jail, but the damage was done. The line had been crossed. Elena called me an hour later. They returned the money, she asked. Yes. Good. That mitigates the criminal risk for now. But it solidifies our civil case, Elena said. Avery, they have now violated the terms of your grandfather's trust in 3 separate ways. 1, the attempted HELOC fraud. 2, the unauthorized subletting. 3, the public disparagement which affects the value of the property. We have enough. Enough for what? For an unlawful detainer, she said. Eviction, not just a notice to quit, but a court-ordered removal. We can file tomorrow. But Avery, once we file, it is public record. Their names will be in the system. Future landlords will see it. This is the nuclear option. I looked around my quiet apartment. I thought about the freeloader post. I thought about the fake signature on the power of attorney. I thought about Chloe, the student Madison tried to rip off. File it, I said. The filing of the eviction suit was the bell that signaled the final round. When the sheriff's deputy taped the summons to the front door of 1402 Oakwood Drive. The reaction was not panic this time. It was performance. My family realized that they could not bully me privately, so they decided to perform publicly. They began to dress differently. My father started wearing his Sunday suit on Tuesdays. My mother wore her pearls to the grocery store. They were costuming themselves as the respectable victims. They started telling neighbors a new story. They said that I was being manipulated by a predatory lawyer. They said I had joined a cult that demanded I cut off my family. They said I was having a breakdown, and they were just trying to hold the house for me until I came to my senses. Madison, typically, went the furthest. She posted a photo of herself holding a Bible, with the caption, "Persecuted but not abandoned. Truth will prevail." It was nauseating. But it was also dangerous. They were building a defense for the court date. They were going to walk into that courtroom and try to charm the judge. They were going to cry. They were going to plead familial misunderstanding. I met with Elena 2 days before the hearing to go over our strategy. We sat in her conference room, the table covered in files. My home stuff folder was there, expanded now into 3 thick binders of evidence. They are going to play the sympathy card, Elena warned me. They are going to say they are elderly even though your dad is only 62. They are going to say they have nowhere to go. Judges are human. Avery, they hate evicting parents. But the law is the law, I said. Yes, Elena agreed. But we need something that makes it impossible for the judge to side with them. We need a smoking gun that isn't just about money. We need to prove they violated the intent of the trust. She pulled a thin, yellow document from the bottom of the stack. I went back to the original trust documents, Elena said. The ones your grandfather signed 10 years ago, not just the deed, but the full trust instrument. I have read it, I said. I know the terms. Did you read the addendum? She asked. Addendum. It was filed separately. Elena said. It is technically part of the letter of wishes, but it was incorporated by reference into the occupancy clause. Most people skip it because it looks like personal sentiment. She slid the paper across the mahogany table. I picked it up. The paper felt brittle. It was typed on a typewriter, not a computer. I recognized the font. It was my grandfather's old Olivetti. Addendum to the Living Trust of Walter Vaughn. Section 4, Paragraph C. Conditions of moral occupancy. I read the words, and I could hear his voice, rough, gravelly, and incapable of suffering fools. I am leaving this house to my granddaughter. Avery, because she is the only one who understands the value of a nail. My daughter Shannon and her husband Rick care about the paint, not the wood. They are permitted to live in this house only so long as they honor the integrity of the home and the dignity of the owner. If at any point the occupants use this property to deceive others, to project a false image of wealth they have not earned, or to publicly shame the true owner, their license to occupy is immediately and permanently revoked. A house built on lies cannot stand, and I will not have my legacy used to shelter hypocrisy. I stared at the paper. My hands were shaking. He knew. 10 years ago. He knew. He saw them. He saw how they treated me. He saw how they treated him. He knew that one day, they would try to take the house and make it a monument to their own ego. He had written a kill switch into his own will. This, I whispered. This is specific. It is incredibly specific, Elena said, smiling a sharp, predatory smile. He defines deceiving others and publicly shaming the true owner as grounds for immediate revocation, the fake HELOC application that is using the property to deceive. The Facebook post, that is public shaming, the subletting scam, that is deception. They broke every single rule he wrote down, I said. Exactly, Elena said. They did not just annoy you, Avery. They violated the express moral conditions of the donor. This isn't just an eviction anymore. This is the enforcement of a dead man's final wish. I ran my finger over the signature at the bottom, Walter Vaughn. I felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion. For 7 years, I thought I was alone in this. I thought I was fighting them by myself, but I wasn't. He had been waiting. He had hidden a sword in the stone, waiting for me to be strong enough to pull it out. We use this, I said. We read this in court. Oh, we are definitely reading this, Elena said. And when we do, I want you to watch your father's face, because he knows this exists. He was the executor of the original estate before it transferred to you. He read this. He just thought you never would. I closed the folder. The fear was gone. The anxiety about the courtroom, about seeing them again, about the drama, it all evaporated. They were walking into a trap that had been set a decade ago by a man who loved me enough to protect me from the grave. Let's go to court, I said. The document Elena had slid across the mahogany conference table was not just a legal instrument. It was a time capsule. As I read the faded type, the font slightly uneven from the ribbon of my grandfather's old typewriter, the room around me seemed to dissolve. The scent of Elena's expensive office coffee was replaced by the smell of sawdust, Old Spice, and the sharp tang of turpentine that always clung to Walter Vaughn's flannel shirts. I had read the trust documents before, of course. When I was 26, grieving and overwhelmed, I had scanned the legalese, looking for the bottom line. I saw that I owned the house. I saw that they were allowed to live there. I stopped reading there because I was young and I wanted to believe that family would act like family. I had missed the fine print, but Walter had not missed a thing. The section was titled Article 4, Subsection C, Conditions of Moral Occupancy. It was not standard legal boilerplate. It was Walter speaking directly from the grave, his voice rough and uncompromising. The right of residency granted to Shannon Rivera, Rick Rivera, and Madison Rivera is conditional. It is not a right of ownership, nor is it a right of unlimited duration. This license to occupy is predicated on the maintenance of the property's integrity and the preservation of the owner's dignity. Should the occupants engage in any behavior that publicly disparages the owner, or should they attempt to leverage the property for deceptive financial gain? The license to occupy shall be considered null and void immediately. I read the next paragraph, and a chill went down my spine. It was as if he had looked into a crystal ball and seen the Facebook post, the fake loan, and the basement scam. I have worked 40 years to build this foundation. I will not have it used as a stage for vanity. If the occupants cannot live in truth, they cannot live in my house. He knew, I whispered. My voice sounded small in the quiet office. He knew exactly who they were. He was a smart man, Avery, Elena said softly. He did not trust them. He loved them. Maybe, in his own way, but he did not trust them. He knew that if he gave them the title, they would mortgage it to buy fancy cars and impress the neighbors. And he knew that if he gave it to you, they would resent you for it. I closed my eyes and saw him. Walter Vaughn was a man who drank cheap black coffee and drove a truck until the wheels fell off. He hated waste. But more than waste, he hated pretense. He called it living for the gallery. I remembered one afternoon when I was 12, watching my father polish his leased BMW in the driveway. Walter had stood on the porch, shaking his head. Some men spend so much time shining the hood they forget to check the engine. He had told me, never be a shiny hood. Avery, be the engine. For 7 years, my family had treated me like a broken part of the engine. They had called me a freeloader. They had mocked my quiet life. And all the while, they were living in a house protected by a clause that specifically forbade that exact behavior. This changes everything, I said, looking up at Leona. It does, she agreed. She tapped the document. This isn't just a landlord-tenant dispute anymore. This is a breach of trust. The freeloader post, that is public disparagement affecting the owner's dignity. The HELOC application, attempting to leverage the property for deceptive financial gain. The basement rental, deceptive gain. We do not have to prove they are bad tenants. We just have to prove they violated Walter's specific conditions. The post, I said. A realization dawning on me. Madison's post. She thought she was humiliating me, but she was actually signing her own eviction notice. She notarized it for us, Leona said with a grim smile. When we served the amended complaint, citing the specific violations of Article 4, the reaction at 1402 Oakwood Drive shifted from performative outrage to genuine, primal terror. They had consulted a lawyer. I knew this because the bluster stopped. Any competent attorney would have looked at that trust document, looked at the Facebook screenshots, looked at the police report regarding the rental scam, and told them to start packing. The phone calls started coming in a different tone. My mother called first. She did not scream. She sounded small, frail, a voice I had never heard her use before. It was the voice of a woman who realized the audience had left the theater. "Avery," she said, and I could hear the wet hitch of tears in her breath. "Please, you cannot do this. Your father, his heart. The stress is killing him. We are too old to move. We have nowhere to go." "You have the equity from your own savings," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And you have Dad's pension. You are not destitute. Mom, you just cannot live in a $700,000 house for free anymore. It is our home," she wept. "I picked out the curtains. I planted the roses." "And you called the owner a freeloader in front of the whole world," I said. "You watched Madison steal from me and you helped her cover it up. You tried to mortgage the roof over your head behind my back. That is not how you treat a home, Mom. That is how you treat a resource." "We are sorry," she cried. "We are so sorry. We will sign the lease. We will pay the rent. Just withdraw the filing. Please, Avery, do not make us stand in court." "It is too late for a lease," I said. "You broke the trust. Literally." Then came my father. He did not cry. He tried to negotiate, using the man-to-man tone he used with insurance clients. "Avery, listen," he said. "We can work this out. I admit, things got out of hand. Madison, well, you know your sister. She is high-spirited, but we can fix this. I will talk to the bank. I will make sure the loan application is withdrawn. We will pay you back the legal fees. Let us just settle this quietly. You do not want to be the daughter who sued her parents." "I am not the daughter who sued her parents," I corrected him. "I am the victim who is stopping her abusers, and the loan application is already with the fraud department. Dad, you cannot withdraw a crime." He hung up on me. Then, inevitably, the flying monkey returned. Aunt Marcy. She called at 8 o'clock at night. I was eating dinner, alone in my peaceful apartment. "Avery," she began, her voice heavy with disappointment. "I heard about the court date. I just cannot believe you are going through with this. Jesus tells us to turn the other cheek. Jesus also threw the money changers out of the temple, I said. And I'm pretty sure he was not big on forgery. They are willing to apologize publicly, Marcy said, ignoring my point. Madison said she would write a retraction. Shannon is a wreck. Avery, think about what you are doing. You are breaking the family apart. The family was broken when they decided I was a wallet instead of a person, I said. But Marcy, since you are so passionate about this, I have the same question I asked you last week. What? The offer stands, I said. If you think what I'm doing is so wrong, you can stop it right now. Call them. Tell them they can move into your basement. Tell them you will support them. Tell them they can live with you for free. Silence. The same heavy, guilty silence as before. Well, I pressed, it is a simple solution. You save the family. You be the hero. It is complicated. Avery, she stammered. Bob's office is down there. We do not have the setup. Then do not tell me how to manage my property, I said. If you are not paying the bill, you do not get to order the meal. I blocked her again. The desperation reached its peak the next morning. Madison, realizing that her freeloader post was the smoking gun that activated the eviction clause, decided to try and rewrite history one last time. She posted a new status. It was long, rambling, and filled with the kind of therapeutic buzzwords people use to avoid accountability. I want to address the recent tension in my family. A few weeks ago, I made a post about my sister moving out. I used the word freeloader. It was a joke. It was just sibling banter that got taken out of context. I was under a lot of stress with my own business and helping my parents, and I lashed out. I never meant to hurt anyone. I love my sister, and I just want our family to be whole again. Please stop spreading hate. Family, first apology, misunderstanding. She did not tag me. She did not call me. She just performed the apology for her audience, hoping it would look good to a judge. Then, she texted me. Madison, I posted an apology. I said it was a joke. Are you happy now? Call the lawyer and stop this. I looked at the text. Are you happy now? It was not an apology. It was a transaction. She was trading a few hollow words for a house. I took a screenshot of the text. Then I took a screenshot of her apology post. I opened the folder on my laptop where I kept the case files. I dropped the images into the subfolder labeled Evidence of Admission. By posting that apology, she had admitted that she wrote the original post. She admitted she knew it was hurtful. And by texting me, "Are you happy now?" she proved that the public apology was insincere and manipulative. She thought she was fixing it. In reality, she had just authenticated the evidence for me. I printed the screenshots. I sat on the floor of my living room. I had the physical copies of everything spread out around me in a semicircle. The warranty deed, the trust document with the moral occupancy clause, the freeloader Facebook post, the forged power of attorney, the HELOC application, the rental receipt from Chloe, the text messages from my mother, the apology post. I picked them up, one by one, and stacked them into a neat pile. I aligned the edges perfectly. It looked like a manuscript. It looked like a story. It was the story of how they lost everything by trying to take too much. I placed the stack in my leather satchel. Tomorrow was the court date. I imagined them in their house right now, scrambling, rehearsing their lines, trying to figure out which mask to wear. They were probably practicing their tears. They were probably trying to memorize the script where they were the victims. But they had forgotten the most important rule of the stage: never improvise when the other actor has the script. I was not nervous. I felt the same cold, sharp focus I felt when I closed a fraud investigation. The numbers added up. The evidence was locked. I looked at the stack of papers one last time. It reminded me of a row of dominoes, standing tall and precarious. All it would take was one finger, one light touch from the judge, and then gravity would take over. The county courthouse was a building designed to strip away pretense. It had fluorescent lighting that hummed with a low, headache-inducing frequency, and floors made of linoleum that squeaked under the heels of nervous defendants. It was the antithesis of the curated, filtered world my sister lived in. There were no ring lights here. There were no angles to hide a double chin or a lie. There was only the record. My family arrived 10 minutes late, a tactical decision designed to make an entrance. They walked in looking like the cast of a daytime soap opera filming a funeral scene. My father, Rick, was wearing a charcoal suit that I knew he hadn't worn since my grandfather's funeral 7 years ago. It was slightly tight across the shoulders, a physical reminder that he was not the man he used to be. My mother, Shannon, wore a modest navy dress and a string of pearls, clutching a handkerchief she didn't need yet, but was definitely planning to use. And Madison had dressed down. She wore a simple cardigan and flats, pulling her hair back to look younger, more innocent. She looked around the courtroom not with fear, but with a scanning gaze, searching for an audience. She seemed disappointed that the gallery was empty save for a few bored clerks and a man sleeping in the back row. This wasn't the trial of the century. It was an unlawful detainer hearing on a Tuesday morning. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Leona. I wore my usual work clothes, a blazer and slacks. I didn't look at them. I stared straight ahead at the wood grain of the judge's bench. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Holloway entered. He was a man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and the weary expression of someone who had heard every excuse humanity had to offer. He sat down, adjusted his robe, and looked at the docket. "Rivera versus Rivera and Rivera," he read. He looked up over his glasses. "Well, this looks like a pleasant family reunion. Counsel, proceed." Elena stood up. She was calm, precise, and deadly. "Your Honor, we are seeking an order for immediate possession of the property at 1402 Oakwood Drive based on a breach of the license to occupy granted by the Walter Vaughn Trust. The defendants have no lease, pay no rent, and have violated the specific moral conditions of their residency as outlined in the trust instrument." My father's lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson, not the one who handled the will, but a cheaper strip mall attorney they had hired in a panic, stood up. He looked flustered. "Objection, Your Honor," he said. "This is a domestic dispute. My clients are the plaintiff's parents. They have lived in this home for 12 years. They have equitable interest. This is an attempt by an ungrateful daughter to throw her elderly parents onto the street over a family argument." Judge Holloway looked at my father. "Sir, are you on the deed?" "Well, no, but," my father started, his voice booming. He was using his sales voice, the one that filled a room. "But my father-in-law bought that house for us, for the family. Avery is just holding the paper. She has no right." "Stop," the judge said. He didn't shout. He just dropped the word like a gavel. "You are not a witness yet. Sit down." My father sat, his face reddening. "Ms. Park," the judge said to Elena, "show me the paper." Elena walked to the bench. She placed the files down one by one. "Exhibit A," she said. "The warranty deed, recorded 7 years ago, showing Avery Rivera as the sole owner. Exhibit B," she continued, "the notice to quit and demand for possession, served via certified mail and process server, which the defendants ignored. Exhibit C," she said, and this was where the air in the room changed. "Evidence of the defendant's attempt to encumber the property without the owner's consent. A fraudulent application for a home equity line of credit in the amount of $150,000. Submitted 2 days before the eviction notice was sent." Judge Holloway picked up the HELOC file. He flipped through it. He paused at the forged power of attorney. He looked at the shaky signature. Then he looked at my father. "Did you sign this?" the judge asked. My lawyer intervened. "Your Honor, that is the subject of a separate fraud investigation currently active with the bank's internal department. We are submitting it today solely to prove hostile intent and a violation of the residency agreement." The judge stared at my father for a long, uncomfortable 10 seconds. My father shrank. The bluster evaporated. He knew that the man in the robe was looking at a felony. "Continue," the judge said, his voice colder. "Exhibit D," Elena said. Evidence of unauthorized subletting. A receipt for $1,200 taken from a third party. Chloe Miller, by defendant Madison Rivera. For a basement unit that does not legally exist. Madison gasped. She looked at her lawyer, panic in her eyes. I gave it back, she whispered loudly. I gave the money back. Order, the judge said. Elena did not stop. She was building a wall, brick by brick, sealing them in with their own actions. And finally, Exhibit E, Elena said, the freeloader post, a public disparagement of the owner, posted by Madison Rivera and endorsed by Rick and Shannon Rivera, characterizing the owner as a parasite on the very property she owns and maintains. She handed the screenshot to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. Judge Holloway looked at the picture of the driveway. He read the caption, finally, the freeloader is gone. He looked at me, then he looked at Madison. You called your landlord a freeloader, the judge asked. It wasn't a legal question. It was a question of pure incredulity. Madison stood up. It was a joke. It was just social media. Everyone knows I didn't mean it. Avery is just being sensitive because she has no friends and— Sit down, the judge snapped. Now. Madison collapsed into her chair, her face burning. My mother reached out and took her hand, starting to cry soft, rhythmic sobs. It was the performance she had rehearsed, but the audience wasn't buying it. Your Honor, Mr. Henderson tried again. My clients are willing to sign a lease. They are willing to apologize. Eviction is a harsh remedy. They are family. Elena played the final card. The remedy is not harsh. Your Honor, it is mandated by the grantor. She picked up the yellowed document, the addendum from Walter Vaughn. The trust specifically states, Elena read, her voice ringing clear in the silence, that residency is conditional on the preservation of the owner's dignity. It states, if the occupants use this property to deceive others, or to publicly shame the true owner, their license to occupy is immediately and permanently revoked. She looked at the family. They did not just break a lease, Elena said. They broke the specific moral conditions set by the man who bought the house. They used the house to try and steal $150,000. They used the house to scam a student, and they used the house to publicly humiliate the woman who was keeping a roof over their heads. They evicted themselves. Your Honor, we are just asking you to sign the paper. Judge Holloway took the yellowed document. He read it carefully. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. In 20 years on the bench, the judge said, I have seen a lot of ungrateful tenants, but I have rarely seen a case where the tenants were so determined to destroy their own safety net. He looked at my parents. You had a free home, he said, a gift, and you treated the person giving you that gift with contempt. You tried to steal from the equity. You tried to profit from a property you do not own, and you mocked the owner to the world. He signed the order. The sound of the pen scratching on the paper was the loudest noise in the room. Judgment for the plaintiff, he announced. Immediate possession granted. The defendants have 7 days to vacate the premises. The sheriff is authorized to enforce removal on the 8th day. He looked at Madison. And regarding the cross-complaint for harassment you filed against your sister dismissed with prejudice. And young lady, if I see one more post about this case, or about this property, or about the plaintiff, I will hold you in contempt of court so fast your head will spin. That is a gag order. Do you understand? Madison nodded, tears streaming down her face, real tears this time, tears of humiliation. And Mr. Rivera, the judge said to my father, I am attaching a transcript of these proceedings to the file regarding the HELOC application. If the district attorney decides to pick that up, that is out of my hands. But I suggest you get a criminal defense attorney. We are adjourned. The gavel banged. It was over. I stood up. I felt light. I felt like I had been carrying a backpack full of stones for 5 years, and someone had just cut the straps. I gathered my files. I put the yellowed document back in its protective sleeve. My family was still sitting at their table, stunned. They looked like statues of shock. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that the world hadn't bent to their will. I walked toward the exit, I had to pass their table to leave. My mother stood up. She lunged for me, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was tight, desperate, the grip of a woman who was drowning and didn't care who she pulled down with her. "Avery," she sobbed. "Avery, you can't do this. We are your family. Where will we go? You have to stop this. Just tell the judge. Please, baby, Mommy is sorry." She used the word mommy. She hadn't used that word in 20 years. She was trying to trigger the child in me, the little girl who wanted to be loved. I looked at her hand on my wrist. I looked at her tear-streaked face. I looked at my father, who was staring at the floor, defeated. I looked at Madison, who was furiously typing on her phone, probably telling her friends some new lie about how the system was rigged. I didn't yell. I didn't pull away violently. I just engaged my arm muscles and pulled my hand back, breaking her grip. It was a smooth, firm motion. "I didn't do this, Mom," I said. My voice was calm, barely above a whisper. "You did. We just wanted what was best," she cried. "No," I said. "You wanted the house without the owner. You wanted the money without the work. And you wanted the status without the respect." I looked at all three of them. "Walter gave you a choice," I said. "He wrote it down 10 years ago. You could have lived there forever if you had just been kind, if you had just been honest. But you chose the lie. You chose the hollow pride, and now you have the hollow outcome." "Avery!" she screamed as I walked away. I didn't look back. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom and stepped out into the hallway. The air in the hallway was cooler. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. Leona came up beside me. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed my shoulder. "You did good," she said. "It is done." I said. The next 7 days were a blur of logistics. I didn't go back to the house. I hired a moving company to pack their things, a final act of charity they didn't deserve. But when I did for the sake of the house itself, I wanted them out fast, and I wanted them out without damaging the walls. They moved into a short-term rental motel on the edge of town. I heard from a cousin that Madison was telling people they were downsizing to travel. On the 8th day, the sheriff met me at the property. The house was empty. I walked through the rooms. The living room where my father had ignored me. The kitchen where my mother had criticized my job. The hallway where Madison had filmed her TikToks. It was silent. The freeloader was gone, but so were the parasites. I walked down to the basement. I saw the wall Madison had hastily painted white to hide the damp spots for her tenant. I saw the cheap lock she had installed on the door. I went back upstairs. I stood in the center of the living room. I took out my phone. I had drafted a post, a picture of the keys, a caption explaining everything, a receipt to clear my name once and for all. My thumb hovered over the post button. I thought about Madison. I thought about her desperate need for validation, her addiction to the likes, her belief that if it wasn't online. It didn't happen. I realized that posting this would just be playing her game. It would be stepping onto her stage. I deleted the draft. I put the phone in my pocket. I called the real estate agent I had interviewed the week before. "List it," I said. "I don't want to see it. Just sell it, as is." "Are you sure?" the agent asked. "It is a beautiful property. It has history." "It has history," I agreed. "But I have a future." I sold the house 3 weeks later to a nice young couple with a baby on the way. They didn't know about the drama. They didn't know about the fraud. They just saw a home. The money from the sale went into my investment account, adding a significant zero to the number that my family had mocked. I never spoke to them again. I blocked the numbers. I blocked the emails. I became truly invisible to them, exactly as I had been when I lived under their roof. But this time, it was my choice. Madison eventually had to get a job. I heard she works retail at the mall now. I wonder if, when she folds the clothes and tags the merchandise, she thinks about the day she stood in the driveway and posted that picture. I wonder if she realizes that the internet remembers, but real life collects the debt. She wanted the world to know the freeloader was gone. She got her wish. The freeloader is gone, and she took the house with her. Thank you so much for listening to Avery's story of justice and claiming her power. If this story resonated with you, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow from all corners of the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Leona Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who need to see that sometimes. Silence is the loudest revenge of all. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.